Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material.
Right, and I'm really excited for where we're going today.
Yeah, me too. So I want you to imagine, just for a moment, staking your entire survival on a prediction. I mean, your life, the lives of your family, the future of your entire community.
Basically, everything you hold dear.
Exactly. And you're staking it all on a prediction that a totally bankrupt, utterly destroyed empire is somehow going to conquer the world's reigning superpower. And not in some distant future, but in less than a decade.
Which is just a staggering claim.
It is. And wait, it's not just that. Imagine simultaneously predicting that a handful of local persecuted outcasts will magically overthrow a deeply entrenched corporate and political monopoly on the exact same day.
It sounds totally impossible.
Right. It sounds like a hypothetical thought experiment. Mm-hmm. But in the year 615 AD, that exact, frankly, insane geopolitical gamble was recorded as absolute truth.
Yeah, it was laid down in stone, basically.
So today, we are taking a really profound look at 3 highly influential chapters from the Qur'an. We're looking at chapter 30, which is known as the Romans, then chapter 31, named Luqman, and chapter 32, the Adoration.
And we're really anchoring this deep dive in detailed historical commentary, just to understand the mechanics of what these texts are actually doing.
Yeah, and let's establish our mission here. We are not theologians, and we are definitely not here to debate religious dogma.
No, not at all.
We are acting as your guides. We want to help you extract practical wisdom, moral insight, and tangible life application from a 7th century text. We're taking this ancient architecture and mapping it onto our very loud, very complicated 21st century realities.
The necessity of doing that mapping, it becomes obvious the second you look at the raw historical context.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we're analyzing a text that directly confronts the psychology of global political collapse. I mean, it addresses the visible, physical corruption of the natural environment caused by human hands.
Which sounds completely modern.
It really does. And it provides this masterclass on the nuances of navigating toxic family dynamics. And it even dissects the psychology behind arrogant, hyper-aggressive public communication.
So the temporal setting might be 7th century Arabia, but the psychological landscape is, well, it's completely contemporary.
Exactly. We deal with all of this today.
So I want to start by dissecting that geopolitical gamble I mentioned because it really frames the psychology of everything that follows.
It sets the whole stage.
Right. So chapter 30 is named The Romans. And to understand why a 7th century Arabian text is opening with Roman foreign policy, we really have to look at the pressure cooker of Mecca around, 615 or 616 AD?
Yeah, right around there.
Set the baseline for us. What is the daily reality for the initial audience reading or hearing this text?
So the daily reality is, it's basically one of systematic terror.
Wow.
Yeah. The early Muslims in Mecca at this time, they are a tiny, fiercely persecuted minority. We are talking about severe economic boycotts, physical torture, social ostracization.
And this is all at the hands of the ruling tribe, right? The Quraysh.
Exactly. The Quraysh are in power. So the Muslims are this helpless underclass. They have no standing army. They have zero political leverage. And in many cases, they don't even have homes.
So they are entirely marginalized?
Completely. But zooming out, this micro-level oppression in Mecca is happening in the shadow of a massive macro-level world war.
Right, the superpower clash.
Yeah, the 2 dominant superpowers of late antiquity. So you have the Persian Sassanid Empire and the Byzantine Roman Empire. And they are locked in this brutal existential conflict.
And right before chapter 30 comes down, something major happens.
Yes.
Right.
The Persians have just dealt this catastrophic, seemingly final blow to the Romans.
And catastrophic is really the right word here, because looking at the historical commentary, it notes that the Persians didn't just win some minor border skirmish.
Oh, no, it is a total rout.
They took Syria, they took Jerusalem, they took Egypt. I mean, the Persian armies pushed all the way through Asia Minor and were physically encamped at the very gates of Constantinople.
Which was the heart of the Roman Empire.
Right. So the Roman Empire, for all intents and purposes, was shattered. They were economically bankrupted, dealing with violent internal dissensions. Basically, they were done.
And that creates this profound psychological crisis back in Mecca.
How so? Why would a superpower war so far away matter to these persecuted people in Mecca?
You have to look at the ideological alignment. So the Quraysh, the oppressors in Mecca, they were polytheists.
Okay.
And the Persians, who had just achieved this total global victory, they were Zoroastrians. Now, They were often categorized by the Arabs at the time as fire worshippers, but fundamentally they did not adhere to a revealed scripture in the Abrahamic sense.
Got it.
But the Romans, however, were Christians. They were people of a book. So the Quraysh essentially weaponized this global news.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. They took the Persian victory over Rome and used it as ideological proof against the early Muslims.
I find the mechanics of that so fascinating. They're using global news to crush the local opposition.
Is-
The logic is essentially, look at the world stage. The great scripture followers of Rome just got completely annihilated by our ideological cousins.
Right.
So this proves that your worldview is weak. You tiny band of Muslims are definitely next. I mean, it's a highly effective form of psychological warfare. It's designed to induce absolute despair.
It is entirely demoralizing. I mean, the Muslims are already being tortured locally, right?
Yeah.
And now the global geopolitical architecture seems to just mathematically prove that they are on the losing side of history.
Which makes what happens next so wild. This is where Chapter 30 executes a move of just staggering audacity.
It really is.
Because in the face of utter Roman devastation and local Muslim despair, the text opens with a highly specific, mathematically falsifiable prophecy.
Yes.
It states that the Romans have been defeated, but within a few years they will be victorious.
And we really need to pause on that phrase, a few years, because the commentary points out that the original Arabic word used there is bid.
Bid.
Yeah, and this isn't some vague, Nostradamus prediction like someday in the mysterious future. The word bid denotes a highly specific window. It means between 3 and 9 years.
That is such a tight window for a ruined empire to bounce back.
It's impossible, but it goes even further.
Right?
It claims that when the Romans somehow miraculously rebound and crush the Persians, on the exact same day, the persecuted believers in Mecca will experience a massive, unforeseen victory of their own.
Okay, I was trying to construct a modern equivalent for this just to explain how impossible this sounds to a modern listener.
I love that. Let's hear it.
So imagine you're standing in a city where a local high school chess club is being ruthlessly bullied by a multi-billion-dollar corporate conglomerate.
Okay, quite the mismatch.
Right. And you predict that within 3 to 9 years, that high school chess club will completely dismantle the corporation.
Sounds crazy.
But wait, simultaneously, you predict that a bankrupt, completely demoralized professional sports team that just lost its stadium and all its funding will miraculously win the world championship on the exact same day the chess club wins.
Right. It's an absurd parlay.
It is. From a strategic, military, or historical standpoint, neither of those things has any probability of happening, let alone on the same day.
Human inference just cannot produce that prediction. I mean, the Romans lacked the infrastructure to even maintain their internal borders at that point, let alone launch an offensive against a highly entrenched, victorious empire.
And the Muslims were essentially homeless refugees.
Exactly. But the historical record actually catches up to the text here.
Yes. Tell us what happened.
Fast forward to 624 AD. The Roman Emperor Heraclius launches this desperate, brilliant counteroffensive. He advances into northern Media, and he completely destroys the great Persian fire temple at Ganzat. The geopolitical tide flips entirely. And in that very same year, a force of 313 raw, inexperienced, entirely ill-equipped Muslims somehow rout a heavily armed professional force of 1,000 Quraysh warriors at the Battle of Badr.
Both predictions fulfilled perfectly within that specific 3 to 9 year window. It's breathtaking.
It really is.
But I want to focus on the why, because the author of this text is not just performing a parlor trick to show off a supernatural ability to see the future.
No, definitely not.
The text is actually laying down a fundamental architectural law regarding human history. It's addressing the psychology of despair.
Yeah, that's the core of it.
Think about how we consume news today. We are constantly bombarded by macro-level global catastrophes. Wars, economic inflation, political instability. We literally watch our modern equivalents of Rome falling on a 24-hour news cycle.
It's exhausting.
It is. And at the same time, we're dealing with our own micro-level struggles, just trying to keep our heads above water. The natural, default human reaction to all that is nihilism. It just feels like the scaffolding of the world is collapsing.
Which makes the modern translation of this ancient moment so vital for you today. Because the underlying philosophy of Chapter 30 is that history is not a chaotic, random series of accidents driven merely by whoever has the biggest army at the moment.
Right.
There is a larger architecture at play. Despair in the face of temporary defeat, whether that defeat is a geopolitical collapse, a societal breakdown, or just a personal failure in your own life, It is essentially an intellectual failure to perceive the broader timeline.
Oh, that's good. An intellectual failure to perceive the broader timeline.
Yeah, because when you were standing in Mecca in 615 AD or at the gates of Constantinople, the present moment feels so final. But the text demands epistemic patience.
Epistemic patience.
Right. It's arguing that the rise, growth, and decay of nations follow structural laws, and that revitalization is often germinating in the exact moment of deepest darkness.
So the practical application for the listener today is this radical reframing of how we process setbacks.
Yes, I got it.
When the current dominant cultural power or the latest disastrous headline tries to convince you that the story is over, this text essentially says you do not have the full data set.
Beautifully put. You don't have all the information.
And what I find really brilliant is the structural transition the text makes right after this. Because after laying down this massive geopolitical thesis, the author doesn't spend the next 10 pages detailing military strategy or political theory.
No, it pivots instantly.
Entirely to the natural world. It starts talking about dirt, rain, and human biology. Why does it do that?
The transition feels abrupt, but it's philosophically necessary. The text uses the mechanics of the natural world to prove the thesis about human history.
Oh, interesting.
The commentary explicitly points out that Chapter 30 turns the reader's attention to the manifestations of divine power in nature. It argues that the exact same unseen power that can take a barren, cracked, dead piece of earth and revitalize it with a sudden rainstorm
is the same power that can revitalize a dead or dying nation.
Exactly. The physical ecosystem is basically a tangible, observable mirror for the invisible societal ecosystem.
And it provides a very specific list of what it calls signs in the universe, right?
Yeah, it points to a few things.
It points to the creation of humans from dust, the biological rhythm of sleep and work, the lightning that induces both fear of destruction and the hope of rain.
All these very grounded natural phenomena.
But the sign that really stopped me in my tracks is in verse 22. It elevates the diversity of human tongues and colors to the exact same level as the creation of the heavens and the earth.
Yeah, that is a huge point.
I mean, look at this through a modern sociological lens. In our world, racial, ethnic, and linguistic differences are almost universally the friction points for tribalism, violence, and division.
Sadly, yes.
Yet here is a 7th century text pointing to human diversity and categorizing it not as an accident of geography and not as a curse, but as a deliberate, beautiful manifestation of creative intent.
And it explicitly categorizes this diversity as a sign for people who reflect.
Which requires effort.
Exactly. It requires active, intentional intellectual engagement. The text is challenging the deeply ingrained human instinct to view the other as a threat.
Right.
If you view linguistic and racial differences as a barrier, you are misreading the architecture of reality. You are looking at a masterclass in very design and calling it a mistake.
Wow. Calling it a mistake.
Yeah. It forces the listener to ask themselves, when you encounter someone fundamentally different from yourself, do you see a reflection of an infinite creator's imagination? Or do you retreat into tribal anxiety?
That is a phenomenal question, and it provides the perfect runway to discuss what the commentary identifies as the central thesis of Chapter 30, and that's the concept of fitra, or inherent human nature.
Yes, fitra is crucial here.
Break down the mechanics of this concept for us because it completely upends how we usually think about religion and truth.
Well, most modern frameworks treat religion or ultimate truth as an external alien software program, right? Something that has to be forcibly installed into the human hardware through cultural conditioning or fear.
Like society imposes it on you.
Exactly. But the concept of fitra, which is found in verse 30, it argues the exact opposite. It describes the right religion as the nature made by Allah in which He has made men.
Okay, so what does that mean practically?
In other words, there's a fundamental spiritual and moral DNA hardwired into every human being by default. The core principles which the commentary identifies broadly as the absolute unity of the Creator and the unavoidable accountability for our actions, they are universally recognizable to the human soul.
So truth isn't something we have to be convinced of from scratch. It's something we have to stop suppressing.
Precisely. If a truth is absolute, it must resonate with the inherent nature of the creature designed to perceive it.
That makes logical sense.
And the commentary cites a profound supporting tradition, stating that every single child is born conforming to this true nature. It is their environment, their parents, their society that conditions them into different sectarian factions, ideologies, or prejudices.
So the hardware is pure, but the cultural software introduces the viruses.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Okay, but I am going to push back hard on this premise.
Go for it.
Because if fitra is real, if humans are naturally, inherently inclined toward recognizing a unified truth and living with moral accountability, why is human history a bloodbath?
Right.
Why is society just a chaotic mess of exploitation and division? If this is our default state, we are astonishingly good at acting against our own nature.
You're not wrong, and that is actually the defining human dilemma. The text anticipates that exact pushback.
It does.
Oh, yeah. The text does not present humans as robotic angels. It highlights that despite this natural inclination, humans actively and continually choose division.
Okay, so why do we do that?
The commentary notes how the text describes people who divide their religion and become parties, every sect rejoicing in what they had with them. We act against our nature because we prioritize psychological comfort over universal truth.
Psychological comfort.
Yeah. Aligning with an ultimate unifying truth is incredibly demanding. It requires moral accountability. It requires changing our behavior.
It's hard work.
Exactly. Tribalism, on the other hand, is easy. We find immense safety in our small, closed-off echo chambers where everyone agrees with us, where our specific group is deemed the chosen or the correct one, and everyone else is just wrong.
It really is the psychological difference between seeking truth and seeking validation.
Spot on.
We want our specific political party, our specific sect, or our worldview validated. Submitting to a higher universal reality that might demand we actually criticize our own tribe. That's terrifying.
It is.
So we trade the vastness of the truth for the coziness of the tribe.
That's beautifully said. And when we suppress that internal compass, when we act against that fitra, the text argues that the consequences do not remain abstract. They actually bleed out into the physical world.
And this brings us to a verse that, honestly, it gave me chills when I read it, because it sounds like it was written yesterday morning.
Oh, I know the one you mean.
It's chapter 30, verse 41. It says, "Corruption has appeared in the land and the sea on account of what the hands of men have wrought, that he may make them taste a part of that which they have done, so that they may return."
It's incredibly striking.
If you strip away the 7th century prose, you have a perfect description of the Anthropocene. Corruption in the land and the sea on account of what the hands of men have wrought.
Yeah.
I mean, you could literally drop that sentence into the executive summary of a global climate change summit, or a documentary on microplastics choking the oceans, or an economic report on global wealth disparity.
The modern resonance is profound because the mechanism it describes is timeless. The text is asserting a direct, unbreakable chain of causality between human morality and environmental or societal stability.
They are directly linked.
Yes. It argues that physical corruption, the breakdown of ecosystems, the collapse of economic fairness, is not a string of random bad luck. It is the physical manifestation of spiritual and moral decay.
But the second half of that verse completely changes the paradigm of how we view these crises, because it says that he may make them taste a part of that which they have done, so that they may return.
Right.
It completely removes the concept of arbitrary, angry punishment. It frames global crises as a built-in feedback loop.
Exactly. If you act against the architecture of reality, if you exploit the earth and exploit your fellow humans, the system is designed to reflect that corruption back onto you.
But why?
Not to destroy humanity out of spite, but to trigger a realization so that they may return.
The friction is an invitation to course correct.
Yes. And the practical question this forces on the listener is deeply uncomfortable.
What is it?
Well, when you encounter friction, breakdown, or corruption in your own life, or when you see it in society, is your default setting simply to complain about the unfairness of the universe?
Like, why is this happening to me?
Right. Or do you have the self-awareness to examine how your own actions, your consumption habits, or your moral compromises are actually feeding that exact corruption?
That is heavy. But it's so necessary. Because if environmental corruption is the macro-level symptom, the text immediately points to the micro-level disease, which is how we handle our resources.
Yeah, it zooms right into the economy.
And this leads us directly to one of the most culturally difficult concepts in this entire deep dive.
It really is a tough one for modern readers.
So in chapter 30, verse 39, the text draws this razor-sharp, unforgiving contrast between two economic models. It contrasts usury, which is the charging of interest and charity. It states that whatever you lay out at usury, seeking to increase your wealth through the property of other men, does not increase with God. But whatever you give in charity, seeking the pleasure of God, will be multiplied.
And we really need to spend some time on the mechanics of this.
We do, because this idea is entirely antithetical to modern life. I mean, our entire global infrastructure is built on the architecture of compound interest.
Exactly.
The bedrock of modern finance is leveraging debt to accumulate personal wealth. So to a modern listener, the idea that true growth comes from giving your assets away, it sounds economically illiterate.
It is radically countercultural, and we have to understand why the text opposes it so fiercely. Because the commentary frames this as the ultimate clash between the doctrine of exploitation and the doctrine of charity.
Okay, unpack the doctrine of exploitation.
Let's look at the mechanics of usury or interest. Mathematically and psychologically, usury is a system of wealth extraction.
Right.
It is a zero-sum game where one person's secure accumulation is directly tied to another person's perpetual debt and vulnerability.
I win because you are losing.
Exactly. And the text argues that while this might cause the numbers in your bank account to increase, it causes your soul, your character, to shrink. You become a hoarder, isolated from the very human beings you're extracting from.
So it breaks that concept of fitra we just talked about, that inherent human unity.
Right.
Because you are now viewing your fellow humans purely as financial instruments to be leveraged.
Precisely. You lose the human connection. So the text proposes an alternative mechanism for growth, which is the economics of the soul.
The economics of the soul.
Yeah. It advocates for zakat, which translates to purifying charity. In this model, wealth is not meant to be hoarded in a stagnant pool. It's meant to circulate like water in an ecosystem.
So it has to keep moving.
Yes. When you give wealth away, specifically without expecting a financial return but seeking ultimate moral alignment, the text claims it undergoes manifold increase.
But how does that multiplication actually work, practically speaking? Because my bank account definitely goes down when I give money away.
Well, on a societal level, a charitable economy increases the velocity of money among those who actually need to spend it. This reduces desperation, crime, and societal friction. It basically builds a cohesive, resilient community.
So the whole ecosystem gets healthier.
Exactly. And on a personal psychological level, the act of giving breaks the tyranny of greed. It frees the human mind from the anxiety of infinite accumulation.
Oh, that's so true.
The text is demanding that we ask ourselves, is our personal security built on the extraction of value from others or the mutual circulation of value?
And the commentary makes a devastating point here, noting that you cannot claim to believe in the brotherhood of man or a unifying creator while you are systematically bleeding. His creation's dry financially.
It's a profound hypocrisy.
It really is. Grappling with that kind of economic paradigm requires immense discernment.
It does.
And discernment is exactly what we need for the next major philosophical point, because it relies on a metaphor that is guaranteed to make modern listeners highly uncomfortable.
Yeah, we have to tread carefully here, but we can't ignore it.
Right. In chapter 30, verse 28, the text attempts to explain the absolute oneness and unshared sovereignty of God. And to do this, it uses a parable involving a master and a slave.
Right.
It asks the polytheists, do you have among your slaves partners in what we have given you, so that you are equal with them and you fear them as you fear each other?
It's a heavy metaphor.
We cannot just gloss over this. Reading a text that uses human slavery as a casual illustration requires us to really confront the historical reality of the text.
One absolutely must confront it head on. And this is where intellectual maturity when reading ancient texts is paramount. We have to understand the sociological wrapping of the 7th century.
Set the scene for us.
The institution of slavery was an entrenched, brutal economic norm across the entire globe at that time. The Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, the Arabian Peninsula, it was everywhere.
It was the water they were swimming in.
Exactly. And the author of the text is not drafting a defense of slavery here.
Important distinction.
Very important. The author is using the existing, universally understood social structures of that exact moment to point out a glaring logical absurdity in the theology of the polytheists.
Okay, so break down the logic of the argument for us. How is the metaphor supposed to function?
It functions as an argument from the lesser to the greater.
Okay.
So the polytheists of Mecca believed that Allah was the supreme creator of the universe. But they also believed he shared his divine power with a pantheon of lesser deities, idols, or associated beings.
Like he delegated his power to partners.
Right. So the text is holding up a mirror to their own societal behavior. It's essentially saying, look at your own human arrogance. You are merely a human being, yet you categorically refuse to share your property, your status, or your power with another human being whom you have deemed your servant.
Right. They would never consider their slave an equal partner.
Exactly. So if a flawed, limited human master refuses to share power with his own human property, how do you possess the intellectual audacity to assume that the absolute infinite creator of the cosmos shares his divine sovereignty with mere creations?
Ah, I see. It is weaponizing their own social hierarchy against their theology.
Yes.
It's exposing a massive cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. And the modern reader must possess the discernment to separate the temporal vehicle from the transcendent truth.
That's a great phrase. Separate the temporal vehicle from the transcendent truth.
Yeah, because we correctly and fiercely reject the institution of slavery today. We view it as an abhorrent violation of human dignity. But rejecting the 7th century sociological wrapping does not invalidate the core philosophical payload inside it.
Right.
The enduring wisdom here is about the absolute, uncompromising, unshared sovereignty of the ultimate reality. If we discard ancient texts entirely just because they use the language of their time, we basically cut ourselves off from the profound truth they're trying to communicate.
That is a crucial framework for navigating any ancient wisdom tradition. You have to be able to extract the medicine from the ancient vial, even if the vial itself is unappealing.
Exactly.
And this brings us to a massive structural shift in our deep dive. Because so far, in Chapter 30, we have been looking at the macro architecture of reality.
The big picture stuff.
Right. We've analyzed geopolitics, the collapse of empires, the global ecosystem, macroeconomic theory. But now, we pivot to Chapter 31.
Now, this chapter zooms all the way in.
It really does. It moves from the architecture of the cosmos to the very intimate architecture of human character.
Yes.
The chapter is named Luqman, and it is entirely centered on a private conversation between a father and his son.
It is a beautiful, profound transition. And, the identity of Luqman himself provides one of the most stunning comparative insights in this entire study.
Yes. What I found genuinely shocking when reading the commentary was who Luqman actually was.
It's fascinating.
I mean, we are reading a foundational 7th century Arabian text, but the centerpiece of this moral masterclass is not an Arab patriarch. According to the sources, Luqman was an Ethiopian sage.
And the inclusion of a Black African sage as the paragon of human wisdom in this text, it's incredibly significant.
Why is that so important to note?
The commentary explicitly notes that his presence here testifies to the universal breadth of these fundamental principles. It is a deliberate proof that divine revelation, profound wisdom, and righteousness are not the monopoly of any single race, language, or geographical nation.
So it's actively dismantling ethnic superiority.
Exactly. By choosing Luqman as the mouthpiece for its core moral teachings, it shatters tribalism.
And the commentary draws a fascinating historical parallel, too. It notes that the name Luqman and the Greek figure of Aesop, as in Aesop's fables, might actually be referring to the identical historical figure.
Yes, the commentary suggests it's highly probable that Aesop is actually a Greek corruption of the word Ethiopian.
That's mind-blowing.
It is, because both are described as enslaved or formerly enslaved African men known for profound wisdom, usually delivered through parables and observation of nature.
Wow.
Furthermore, the commentary highlights that the specific brand of humility Luqman teaches his son heavily echoes the ethical core of the Sermon on the Mount found in the Christian tradition.
Which just proves that the pursuit of a moral life is a shared, borderless human inheritance.
Truly.
So let's dive into the actual curriculum Luqman gives his son, because it is a remarkably practical how-to guide for living.
Very practical.
He begins with the concept of gratitude and boundaries, specifically focusing on parents.
Right.
The text commands gratitude to parents, and it goes out of its way to specifically highlight the mother. It notes that she bears him with faintings upon faintings, and his weaning takes 2 years.
Which is a very visceral acknowledgement of maternal physical sacrifice.
It is a demand for radical gratitude for just the sheer biological cost of your existence, but then Luqman immediately establishes a hard, unyielding boundary.
He does. The transition is quick.
Yes. The text says that if your parents contend with you to associate others with God, which in this context means forcing you to compromise your ultimate moral and spiritual principles, you are commanded not to obey them.
But there's a caveat.
Right. It immediately follows that up by saying you must still keep company with them in this world kindly.
And I want to explore the mechanics of this, because navigating toxic or fundamentally misaligned family dynamics is one of the most stressful human experiences.
Oh, absolutely. It tears people apart.
So what Luqman is teaching here is the incredibly difficult balance between ultimate loyalty and earthly duty.
Oh, okay, unpack that.
He's telling his son that your primary allegiance is to the truth, to your ultimate moral framework. You cannot allow family pressure, guilt, or tradition to force you into spiritual compromise.
So you hold the line.
You hold the line.
Yeah.
However, establishing a firm moral boundary does not grant you a license to be cruel.
Wow.
You are not permitted to use their theological or moral errors as an excuse to abandon your duty of kindness to them in the temporal world.
That asks so much of a person. I mean, in modern psychology, when values clash, the instinct is usually one of two extremes, right?
Yeah.
It's either total enmeshment, where you just cave in and abandon your principles just to keep the peace, or it's total estrangement, where you cut them off completely because the friction is just too uncomfortable.
Exactly. Fight or flight.
But Luqman is demanding a third way. Unwavering internal principles combined with unyielding external kindness.
It requires immense emotional regulation.
It really does. And after establishing these boundaries, Luqman moves to a lesson about the nature of reality itself.
This is a great verse.
He tells his son, "Oh, my son, surely if it is the very weight of the grain of a mustard seed, even though it is in the heart of rock, or high above in the heaven, or deep down in the earth, Allah will bring it to light."
He is attempting to instill a paralyzing sense of absolute moral transparency here.
The mustard seed.
Yeah, the mustard seed is the ancient metaphor for the most infinitesimally small, insignificant thing imaginable, and burying it inside a solid rock. That is the ultimate metaphor for concealment.
No one is ever going to find that.
Exactly. So Luqman is telling his son that the universe is essentially a perfectly recorded ledger. Nothing is truly hidden.
I was trying to think of a modern analogy for this, and the closest thing I could come up with is the concept of a digital footprint or even blockchain technology.
Well, that's a perfect analogy.
Because every single click, every hidden search, every microtransaction is permanently recorded on an immutable ledger.
Right, you can't delete it.
Exactly. And Luqman is arguing that reality itself operates on an immutable moral ledger. Every tiny, unseen injustice you commit, and equally, every tiny, unacknowledged act of goodness you perform, it leaves a permanent trace that will ultimately be brought into the light.
Just imagine how radically your daily behavior would change if you truly believed that your private reality was completely transparent.
It destroys the illusion that you can get away with anything just because no human eyes saw it.
It forces total integrity.
And from this internal awareness, Luqman pivots outward to social conduct. He specifically targets the physical manifestations of arrogance.
Yes.
He tells his son, "Do not turn your face away from people in contempt, nor go about in the land exulting overmuch. Surely Allah does not love any self-conceited boaster."
He is dissecting the micro-expressions of contempt here.
Turning your face away.
Yeah, that is the subtle body language of superiority. It's the eye roll. It's looking past the waiter or the janitor as if they don't even exist.
We see it all the time.
We do. It's the physical signaling that you believe your existence is somehow more valuable than the person standing right in front of you.
And Luqman categorizes this not just as rude.
Well, it's a profound spiritual sickness. And walking around exulting overmuch, strutting through life as if you are entirely self-sufficient, is a delusion. It is a failure to recognize your own fragility and your total dependence on the ecosystem around you.
Which leads perfectly into what is undeniably my absolute favorite piece of advice in this entire deep dive.
Oh, the braying of asses.
Yes, Luqman tells his son, "Pursue the right course in your going about and lower your voice. Surely the most hateful of voices is braying of the asses."
It's so vivid.
The braying of asses. It is such a visceral, incredibly uncomplimentary metaphor.
It is brilliant because it equates aggressive volume with intellectual emptiness.
Let's do a direct modern translation of this because I cannot think of a more accurate description of modern public discourse, especially on social media, than the braying of asses.
It's basically Twitter in a nutshell.
Literally. I mean, look at how we communicate today. The entire architecture of the internet rewards outrage, aggression, and volume. We have deeply internalized the false idea that volume equates to authority.
Sadly, yeah.
If I shout the loudest, if I use the most aggressive insults, if I destroy my opponent with a vicious takedown, then I win.
We mistake aggression for confidence. But Luqman is dismantling that entirely. He's teaching his son that needlessly loud, hostile, arrogant communication is hateful. It is the literal sound of a beast of burden that lacks reason.
Wow.
If your argument is genuinely strong, if your position is actually rooted in truth, it does not require the artificial amplification of shouting.
So the practical application for you, the listener, is really a severe self-audit.
A total audit of how you speak.
Yeah. When you are in a boardroom meeting, when you are arguing with your spouse, or when you are typing out a response online, are you walking through life with unearned arrogance? Are you shouting just to dominate the space?
Right.
The practice here is deliberately cultivating meekness, lowering your voice, taking a breath, because you don't lower your voice because you are weak. You lower it because your internal grounding is so secure that it doesn't need to be screamed to be real.
And, cultivating that kind of quiet, unshakable meekness in daily interactions is perhaps one of the most radical, countercultural things a person can do in a society that is just addicted to noise. It really is. Luqman's entire curriculum is designed to forge a human being who balances an acute awareness of the divine with a profound, practical humility toward every other human being.
It's just a stunning blueprint for character.
Truly.
Now, we need to bring all of these distinct threads together because we've looked at the macro view of geopolitics and society in Chapter 30. We've looked at the micro view of character and daily choices in Chapter 31.
And now we zoom out to the ultimate view.
Right. We conclude with Chapter 32, the Adoration, which pulls the camera way back to focus on the ultimate origin and the ultimate destination of humanity.
Chapter 32 forces the reader to confront the reality of the unseen. It essentially grounds all the previous moral instructions by reminding the human being exactly what they are.
Where does this start?
It begins with the creation narrative. It mentions the physical formation of the human being from dust and the continuation of the species through biology, which it calls an extract of water.
Okay, standard biological origins.
But the pivotal, defining moment of creation is described in verse 9, where it states that God made the human complete and breathed into him of his spirit.
Okay, I really want to dissect that phrase, breathed into him of his spirit, because the commentary is extremely careful to clarify the mechanics of what this actually means. It is not just a poetic way of saying God made the heart start beating, right?
No. It is a profound metaphysical claim. The commentary explicitly distinguishes this from merely endowing a biological form with an animal soul or a basic life force.
Okay.
The breathing of the Spirit represents divine inspiration. It is the injection of the human capacity for higher intellect, complex moral reasoning, and spiritual perception.
So it's what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom.
Exactly. It is the exact mechanism that elevates a human being from simply being a highly functioning, tool-making primate into a creature capable of perceiving ultimate truth.
Ah, so it is the source code of that fitra we discussed earlier.
Exactly. It's all connected.
If you truly internalize that concept that every single human being you interact with, regardless of their status, the politics, or their flaws, is walking around carrying a breath of the divine, it radically alters your behavior.
You can't unsee it.
You can't logically look at someone with contempt, as Luqman warned against, if you recognize the divine breath within them.
It assigns an inherent, unerasable dignity to human life, but it also assigns a terrifying level of responsibility.
How so?
Because you have been given this capacity, you are accountable for how you use it.
And that accountability leads directly to the ultimate destination.
Right.
Chapter 32 doesn't just explain where we came from, it points to where all this moral effort is leading.
The end game.
There is this beautiful, highly mysterious concept regarding the ultimate reward for those who actually manage to navigate this life righteously. Verse 17 says, "No soul knows what is hidden for them of the refresh of the eyes."
What is hidden for them? The commentary is fascinating here because it admits the limitations of the text itself.
It admits its own limits.
Yeah, it notes that the descriptions of the ultimate reality, the hereafter, are inherently metaphorical. It cites a famous tradition stating that the true blessings of the ultimate reality are things that no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and what the heart of man has not conceived.
So it is fundamentally beyond our physical perception and our cognitive capacity to even imagine.
Yes. The text is stating that human language and human imagination are simply inadequate tools to convey the reality of the unseen.
I really want to look at the modern translation of this concept because it challenges the core operating system of 21st century life.
Oh, absolutely. We hate the unseen.
We do. We live in a world that is pathologically obsessed with instant gratification and visible metrics.
Everything has to be measured right now.
Exactly. We demand immediate, concrete proof for every effort. If we post something, we want to see the engagement metrics immediately. If we invest money, we want to see the quarterly returns. If we adopt a new diet, we want to see the physical results in the mirror within a week.
We are conditioned to only value what our physical eyes can measure in the present moment.
Right. But this text is challenging us to labor for and trust in a reality that we fundamentally cannot measure, see, or even fully comprehend. It is asking us to delay gratification, not just for a few years, but for an eternity.
It requires a profound, agonizing shift in human orientation. Because if you only work for what your physical eyes can see, your life will be inherently limited to this temporary, decaying material world.
The text is making a final sweeping argument, isn't it?
It is. It's saying, trust the architecture of the unseen. Trust that living with the quiet humility of Luqman, choosing to circulate wealth in charity rather than exploiting others through usury, and holding fast to your moral compass even when empires are literally collapsing around you, will ultimately result in a reality of joy that currently defies your ability to comprehend it.
It is a call to trust that the ledger of the universe is just, even when the scaffolding of your immediate life looks like it's falling apart.
Which brings us to a perfect place to really synthesize everything we've explored today.
Let's do it.
If I could leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought, to mull over something that bridges the ancient world and our hypermodern reality, it comes from a verse we briefly passed over in chapter 31.
Oh, verse 27.
Yes. The author of the Qur'an states that even if every single tree on earth were manufactured into pens and the entire ocean was converted into ink, with 7 more oceans added to it to replenish it, the words of Allah would not be exhausted.
That is amazing. The pens would break, the oceans would run totally dry, and the knowledge of the Creator would still be infinite.
Exactly. It is a stunning visual metaphor about the absolute limitlessness of divine knowledge juxtaposed against the microscopic limitations of human understanding.
So how does that apply to us today?
Well, I want you to think about how this radically reframes our modern obsession with knowing it all. I mean, we live in the information age. We carry supercomputers in our pockets. We've been conditioned to feel entitled to possess an instant, fully formed opinion on every global geopolitical event, every nuance of economic policy, every scientific discovery, and every cultural conflict.
Oh man, that is so true. We suffer from this illusion that if we just consume enough data, if we just doom scroll long enough, we will somehow grasp the whole picture.
We think we are gods of information just because we have Wikipedia.
Precisely. But this text suggests that true wisdom isn't about acquiring all the data points. True wisdom is recognizing the infinite depths of what we cannot know.
It is about epistemic humility.
Epistemic humility.
Yes, it is accepting our profound limitations, putting down the phone, and choosing instead to move through our incredibly brief lives with the quiet confidence, the moral clarity, and the profound humility of Luqman.
That's the heart of this section. This is wisdom for the present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.